All right, welcome to the House Environment and Transportation Committee, Wednesday, April 1st. We will start with take two of SB 10, Senator Alonso, State Highway Administration Speed Monitoring Systems Application Approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for indulging me on this second day of my bill hearing. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senator Alonso Washington here to present on Senate Bill 10. Like many of you, we have community walks in our districts where we walk on the state highways and look for any instances of concern, speeding, sidewalk repairs, all those things. I've done this multiple times in my district, and what I learned from my municipalities is that they have a hard time when they're trying to slow down traffic or hold people accountable for slowing down or speed monitoring. They have about a year of a process through SHA to get approved for said request for a speed monitoring camera. And I confirmed that with SHA that it takes literally a year or more for these to be approved on a certain highway. And what I did was create a piece of legislation that would propose that we put a timestamp on that of 120 days. I initially came in at 90. I worked with SHA, and they said, okay, give us a month. So we went to 120 days. So simply put, Mr. Chairman, this bill says that SHA would have to approve, deny, or return as incomplete an application to install a speed monitoring system within 120 days of receipt of said request. If SHA fails to meet that deadline, the application will be deemed approved. SHA has agreed with the amendments that we propose and has agreed that this is the bill that they would like, they support. And so we worked on the amendments with them in the Senate. And for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, because everybody they believe that this is the best route to take, I think this would be, I ask for the committee to have a favorable report on this bill.
Thank you. Any questions for the senator? All right, thanks for coming back.
Thank you, sir.
Let's move on to Senator Bailey. We'll start with House Bill 558, Chesapeake Bay Enhancement Program and Maryland Seafood Industry Financial Assistance Fund established. If you have a panelist or anything, bring them up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can bring my panelists up? Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and distinguished members of the committee. Senate Bill 558 would codify the existing Chesapeake Bay Enhancement Program and ensure that the funds spent as part of this program are used in accordance with the Maryland Constitution. The provisions of Section 1 of this bill are similar to House Bill 1599, which was sponsored by Delegate Jacobs. You heard that bill earlier this session, so I will not repeat what was said at that hearing about why codifying this program and making it permanent is so important to our state's oyster population and the Chesapeake Bay. I would like to speak mostly about Section 2 of this legislation, establishing the Maryland Seafood Industry Financial Assistance Fund. The purpose of this fund would be to provide financial assistance, including loans to commercial watermen and small businesses that are associated with the seafood industry. As I know you are aware, our commercial watermen have been devastated by the recent events. First, there was a multi-state salmonella outbreak linked to raw oysters that caused a decline in consumer demand for oysters. On top of that, we all remember December and January with the harsh weather conditions and the ice that we experienced this winter that made harvesting oysters very difficult. That was further compounded by the effects of the largest sewage spill in the United States that happened on the Potomac River. The creation of this fund is part of our continuing efforts to support this important part of our state's heritage, our economy, and the environment. I'm very proud to share with you that the final budget bill has money accounted for this fund contingent on the passing of this legislation. This legislation also includes language that a borrower who holds a Title Fish license and is delinquent in the repayment of a loan given from this fund will not be allowed to sell or otherwise transfer that Title Fish license until they have repaid their obligation to the state. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 558. I turn this over to my panel as we will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Jim Mullen with the Maryland Oystermen's Association. We're in favor of this bill, and I'll just give you a little quick background. This program started back in 1996. If any of you were in office or remember Site 104, it was kind of a red flag in the bay with open bay dumping. MDOT and the port had an issue with that from an ecological and environmental standpoint. The oyster industry was able to find a place in the bay to put that dredge spoil material that was non-intrusive and did not present any issues. In return with that, the program was set up for a program set up with the oyster industry for an MOU with regard to financing the oyster industry for finding that area to dump the spoils, and also to create a memorandum of understanding for the oyster industry and the recovery program in the bay to create a viable economic foundation for the bay ecosystem. And so that program has been renewed every 5 years with a memorandum of understanding, and it's been a good working relationship between the watermen, the oyster industry, and the Maryland Department of Transportation on that MOU, and it's been continuing, and I know that names and faces change over time, but the goals and objectives have been consistent, and we're grateful for that working relationship with the port and MDOT and, of course, the Department of Natural Resources. So that's why we're just in favor of this moving forward. It solidifies this working relationship. Thank you.
Chair and members of this committee, my name is Robert T. Brown. I'm president of the Maryland Watermen's Association. Back in 2003, our oyster harvest was down to 26,000 bushels. That was the lowest that was ever recorded. By the year 2020, we were declared a sustainable oyster harvest, and that was 2 million bushels that year. By 2023, our harvest was up to over 700,000 bushel a year. And this was all made due to a lot of the funds that we got from this program. What it did, it gave us funds so we could plant more shells, we could get spat on shells, and we could plant fresh shells for the oyster cults to sit on. And without these funds, we wouldn't have been able to have so much success. And when you go from 2003, 26,000 bushel at a low, and you go to 2023, which is 20 years, and now you're 720,000 bushels that was harvested that year. That is a success, and we need to keep this going. We got more bottom. We need to rebuild and expand. Thank you very much, and I'd like to have a favorable on this. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, fellow committee members. My name is Jeff Harrison. I'm president of Talbot Waterman Association. The seed and shell repletion program is very dependent on these funds. Probably this monies will account for about 40% of all the funds that are spent to do oyster restoration. Of course, we all understand the importance of oysters in the bay. As we know also right now, it's probably one of the best times it ever was. And so these funds will be used to put shells directly on the bottom, at least in my county. Another point about these funds is that they are split between 11 counties that border the bay. And so in some counties, it's probably is 80 to 90% of all the funds that they get to do this work. So for those reasons, I'm asking for a favorable vote on this bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio, Talbot Watermen's Association. I wanted to start by just pausing and saying that it's not every day that you have commercial watermen, aquaculturists, and the conservation community on the same side of the issue. In fact, we have support from 25 different organizations for this legislation, and I think that that just underscores the importance of this program. In fact, I would argue that no other oyster replenishment program in the state produces what this program produces. As an example, attached to our testimony, we've shared some of the success that we've had just in Talbot County alone, including 98 million spat that have been planted over 24.8 acres. This success is due to the fact that recruitment is at an all-time high right now, but also because this program is really effective. And that makes this exactly the right time to continue this program and build on that success. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions and urge the committee's favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a question from Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to go back and hear the bill that we've heard twice, but I did want to speak about the addition to this now with the Maryland Seafood Industry Financial Assistance Fund. That's going to be an amendment added to this bill that will create relief for some of the disasters that Senator Bailey spoke about early in his testimony today. And I know that Talbot County has been doing this recently. There's probably the highest concentration of oystermen in the state, I believe, are in Talbot, and the cases were so severe that I believe the county started raising their own money and started working with some of these watermen and watermen families that were really facing some really hard times. Could you talk about that a little bit, the need for this?
Yeah, we in Talbot County, we have started a fund, an oyster disaster relief fund, and it is being used. And we do see it's mostly mortgages and electric bills that are, going unpaid. And so, yes, there is definitely a need. Now, watermen are extremely resilient. If you're a waterman, you're not only working on the water, you're able to do a lot of things. So, people are getting jobs, but the other problem is right now you have a boat, it's getting ready to be crabbing season, and guess what? You've got to spend a couple $1,000s to get your boat ready, and even more to get your rigs and things ready. So the need for it is without a doubt.
Yeah, so I know that Senator Bailey spoke about the different things that occurred this year, the salmonella, the poor market conditions, the freeze up, the Potomac issue. There were letters sent from Congressman Harris's office on the 4th of February asking NOAA for relief. There was a letter from the governor of Maryland with data attached showing there was a 44% reduction in harvest this year due to these conditions that was sent on the 27th to the Department of Commerce. Secretary Ludwig, and also the entire Maryland delegation on the February 27th. We have not heard a response to those disaster requests, but clearly the governor, the entire Maryland delegation, and others have really indicated the need for this relief, for this disaster relief that's also been added to this bill. So I know that the funds that we've identified have been less than what we'd hoped for, but I really wanted to make certain if you could answer that, the overall need in the state, not just what you have done in Talbot County, Jeff, but this would be statewide for all the families that are affected by this disaster. And so I really wanted to touch on that need. I know Robert T. would probably know people down in his area, but it's all over the state. And clearly, the governor has indicated this in his letter, the entire Maryland delegation, and we have data as of February that we were down 44% this year. Isn't that so?
Thank you very much, Delegate, and we appreciate your comments about that. And I think that hopefully everyone in here understands the significance about this. But what happened when we had the initial indication of the salmonella outbreak that affected and came potentially from Maryland oysters? The buyers told these gentlemen, well, we don't have the market. So as far as working, you can only work 1 day a week, right? So they took an industry that they had been prepared to work 5 days a week, and they were shut down to working one day a week. And that was very significant when you take, and cut your income, but by, you only get a fifth. 4/5 is gone. And then when we got the ice, and Christmas, came along, normally they get a big influx of people. Everybody wants to have a few oysters around Christmas time. Well, that unfortunately did not exist this year because of the weather and with the ice. And then they risked, as you all probably saw, some of the rescues that happened on the Eastern Shore, where some people tried to go out to oyster and actually work that 1 or 2 days a week, and their boats ended up getting cut the hull right out of their boats, and their boats sank, right? And so they were willing to risk their life and their property to try to work those couple days. And then it further got compounded when we all got here, and everybody would go to one of our dinners, and you heard many of our colleagues, well, those oysters aren't from the Potomac, are they? So we all experienced that, and we saw, so they are in a financial crisis, but I would have to say I appreciate the work that our budget committees did, and they identified that need, and we have put some money forward, and we are setting up. There's one thing that I hope everybody, and I know the chair, you understand, the way this fund is being set up is if we do get money from the federal government, we can deposit that money in that fund, and then that fund can be a pass-through to these families.
Delegate Boyce.
Mr. Chair, I do have to address something. I'm not sure I appreciate the chair asking me who is the real RTB of the committee. Is it Robert T. Brown or is it Regina T. Boyce? We will have that fight on another day. But there are 2 RTBs here, and I'm always happy to point that out. Thank you all for being here. I do just want to clarify a couple of things. I know you mentioned that this has been an ongoing fund since about 1996, 97 between DNR and MDOT, and the fiscal note states that the $2 million is included in the Consolidated Transportation Program annually from fiscal 27 to through 2031, and right now sit in placeholder because a current MOU is being worked out between MDOT and DNR. So I wanted to touch on that first, and then ask really, essentially the intent is that instead of having, I guess, these every 5-6 year MOU re-reviews, this would be, you want this somewhat in perpetuity. Is that what I'm?
So actually, appreciate your question. Thank you very much, Delegate. This bill actually would do away with the need for the MOU. And this bill actually takes the port out of the process. And the bill, what we did in the Senate side was we increased the value of the bill from $2 million to 2.25, and 1.5 million every year would go to the oysters on the bottom, and 750,000 can be used for research and administrative, and it can even be used with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
But respectfully, wouldn't that happen now without either the increase of 2.5 million or just the 2 million that occurs every year? I mean, is that the same way the funding works now?
So with the issue and the way this transpired, as these gentlemen can attest to, there have been years where the MOU was not honored.
Yes, I do know that.
Right, and then you would also know that there was not an expandable amount of time put on the MOU for this year. They said that it would be multiple years, which was 2 years, right? So, and it is a very lengthy time going back for the 2 years. This is actually funded through 2026. So this year it is funded, but starting next year, the MOU that we were working on would have only been for 2 years. And that is the whole impetus behind this legislation.
So just because I'm reading the fiscal note and I'm hearing you, I just want to be clear that you're saying potentially that you don't believe that this would be funded beyond those 2 years, even though there's a placeholder in the CTP up until 2031, excuse me.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have additional witnesses on this bill. Allison Colden, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Stacy Kubovic from Arbitco, and Steve McHenry from Arbitco.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. If I could start. Steve McHenry on behalf of the Maryland Agricultural and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, much better known as Arbitco. With me today is our Assistant Director, Stacy Kubovic. We're here in support with amendments of Senate Bill 558. We're here related to the establishment of the Maryland Seafood Industry Financial Assistance Fund, which Senator Bailey described. It's a more broadly chartered fund that can handle both state and federal and other financial assistance to aid our seafood industry. And as you heard, the budget conference has appropriated $2 million to Arbitco to go into this fund, and that funding is contingent on the passage of this legislation. As you heard, there's a great need to assist the commercial oystermen today, and we were hoping to provide loans as high as $7,000 to $10,000 if more funding was provided. But with $2 million available, we can provide $3,000 in loans to those who we think would be eligible, which is approximately 675 oystermen out of the 1,124 that are licensed to harvest oysters this season. And we are going to propose an amendment, Mr. Chairman, to move approximately $337,000 each from two other funds that you've created for us, the Oyster Shucking House Loan Program and the Waterman's Micro Loan Program. We think we won't need those funds over the next year and a half. We're going to ask if we can move those monies over, put them in the new fund, and then if we need them later in the other fund, we'll move them back. So that's an amendment you haven't seen. And in the testimony we've provided, Arbitco is a quasi-governmental entity. State treasurer does not handle our money. The bill drafter, unfortunately, was thinking we were a regular state agency. So we've offered the amendment that you have before you to rectify that so that we can actually operate the new program. I'm running short of time, so I'll defer to my colleague if that's all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Stacy Kubovic, Assistant Director with Arbitco. I don't have anything to add. I'm just here to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Allison Colden, Maryland Executive Director with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, here favorable with amendments on Senate Bill 558. We have provided two very short, simple amendments in our testimony, which we believe will help further align Senate Bill 558 with the intent of the existing MOU and how the program has operated in the past. And that is to expand the uses of the program, which in the past have been used for things like research, demonstration projects, pilot programs, and even restoration. And the second is to require an annual work plan, which is a requirement that is in the existing MOU. However, the latest easily publicly available work plan I can find online is from fiscal year 2017. So that is a key piece of clarity and transparency, both for the public and for oversight of this committee for this program. So we think it's important that that's another existing component of the MOU that is incorporated into the bill. And we encourage your favorable report with these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. A question from Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McHenry, I'm looking for those additional amendments. So you stated the two funds you want to, 350?
337,500 from
That
each.
you want to take from those to put into this fund that you're creating?
That's
in hopes
correct.
that you won't then need it to then have to transfer back?
The way the amendment's going to be drafted, I'm going to give it to council after the hearing, is that we would be authorized to move $337,500 from each of those funds. Both funds today have around $780,000 in them. We think we can operate both
Combined.
programs, $780,000
Combined? Or just in the one?
each. So about 40%
Okay.
is the 337. We think we can operate both programs for the next year and a half with the funds available. And then if we needed those funds to come back, we would have the authority to do that. But we could leave the money there to meet other seafood industry needs if we didn't need the money over in the other programs. So we'd have that flexibility under the way the amendments will be drafted.
So you want, and just so that was clear earlier, you said the Senate approved $2 million to go into this fund.
Into the new fund, the seafood industry fund.
So then you're looking to, is there a goal that you're looking to?
Well, we're looking to add $675,000 additional from.
What's the total goal? Total goal?
The total goal would be $2.675 million. And we think, based on information we received, that approximately 60% of the eligible oystermen maximum would want to have a loan. And with $2.675 million, we could make $4,000 loans each. That's what we're hoping to do with the bill as amended.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. So that concludes Bill on SB 558. We'll stick with Senator Bailey, SB 166, shellfish aquaculture penalty, suspension or revocation of permit or registration card.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and distinguished members of the committee, Senator Bailey representing St. Mary's and Calvert County. Speak very briefly about Senate Bill 166, which would create an administrative process to suspend or revoke the licenses of individuals participating in shellfish aquaculture if they commit flagrant violations of the state law. This bill is identical to House Bill 1400, sponsored by Delegate Jacobs, as it passed this committee and the House of Delegates. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 166. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. I see no questions. That concludes Bill on SB 166. We'll turn to SB 559, Senator, Natural Resources Recreational Fishery Data Collection Program established.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And distinguished members of the committee, Senator Bailey for the record, representing St. Mary's and Calvert County. Today, as we walked over here, saw what a beautiful spring day it is. As we see the trees blooming, I hope that everybody paid attention to the blooms on the dogwood. That same weather that brings us the blooming of the dogwoods is almost to start it brings us the same weather for the spawning of the striped bass in the Chesapeake Bay. It is therefore appropriate that we just talk about that here today with the nursery for the whole Chesapeake Bay for the Atlantic population of striped bass. Senate Bill 559 would establish the recreational fishing data collection program to collect data on the recreational catch of striped bass. Under this bill, the Department of Natural Resources would develop and implement a data collection system for recreational anglers to better inform our state's policies about the harvest and conservation of striped bass in Maryland. The language in this bill has been worked out with the Department of Natural Resources. This bill is intended to address the same issues with our recreational striped bass data as House Bill 1535 was also sponsored by Delegate Jacobs, which you heard earlier this session. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 559. I thank each of you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions, so that concludes the bill here on SB 559. We'll turn to Senator Hester, SB 599, On-Farm Organics Diversion and Recycling Grant Program established.
Thank you, Chair Corman, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Katie Fry Hester here to ask for your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 599. I will be brief because you've heard this bill before. It is by the fabulous Delegate Boyce, who's worked on it for many years and has been a fearless champion. The bill establishes an on-farm organics diversion and recycling grant program in the Department of Agriculture. The Senate bill was amended to conform to the House version, and so I will stop there and ask for your favorable report.
Thank you, and I know the committee, your committee voted it out, the House version out yesterday, so we appreciate that. I do not see any questions, so that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 599.
Thank you very much.
Senator Carrozza, SB 371, Water Pollution Control Discharge Permits, Animal Feeding Operations.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the distinguished House Environment Transportation Committee. For the record, Senator Mary Beth Carrozza, representing Somerset, Worcester, and Wycomico counties, and I'm here to ask you for your favorable consideration for Senate Bill 371, emergency legislation that was approved by this committee, and to ask you for your support. And I wanted to, first of all, thank Delegate Boyce for her leadership in sponsoring the House cross-file HB 395 and addressing this emergency situation in due fashion, and appreciate the process. As a reminder, this emergency legislation would allow farmers to begin construction on their chicken farming operation prior to receiving full coverage under the Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation CAFO General Permit. This bill is narrow in scope and is meant to allow for continuity of business in very specific circumstances and would have no impact on the permitting process or water quality. To be clear, these poultry farms would not be operational until they are fully permitted by the Maryland Department of the Environment, and I appreciate the Maryland Department of the Environment and the Maryland Department of Agriculture working on this. Mr. Chair and members, this is an emergency situation. The permit expired back on July 7th of 2025, and again, appreciate your prompt action in moving House Bill 395, which did pass out of the Senate Education, Energy, and Environment Committee on a consent calendar yesterday, and would appreciate your process and consideration to approve and move Senate Bill 371. And I do really want to thank all of the members of this committee for truly understanding the emergency situation that has been facing our poultry growers in the industry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I do not see any questions. So that concludes the bill here on SB 371.
Thank you for your courtesy.
To Senator Brooks, SB 266, Local Government Regulatory Powers, Regulation of Invasive Trees.
Thanks, Chair Corman and members of this awesome committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on Senate Bill 266. It's local government regulatory powers and regulation of invasive trees. This bill would allow counties and municipalities to ban the sale and planting of invasive plants, ban people from allowing invasive plants to grow on their property, establish a civil fine to enforce invasive tree ordinances, and 4, establish a bounty or a native tree replacement program for invasive trees. SB 266 is cross-filed of HB 35, which has passed out of this committee and the full House with only a few technical differences. We recognize the strength of the House version and respectfully request that the Senate bill be amended to conform to the House passed version. For that reason, I respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report on SB 266 as amended to align with House Bill 35.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Okay, that concludes the hearing on SB 266. We'll turn to SB 431, Senator. Fish and wildlife, endangered and threatened species and migratory birds, regulations, lists, petitions, essential habitats, and takings.
Thanks, Chair Corman and members of the committee. For the record, I'm still Ben Brooks, representing the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 431, that's Fish and Wildlife, Endangered Species and Migratory Birds Regulations, lists, petitions, essential habitats, and takings. SB 431 ensures that Maryland's longstanding protection for endangered and threatened species remain clear, stable, and enforceable under the state law, regardless of the changes at the federal level, and prevents unintended gaps that can arise if federal protection are weakened or rescinded by codifying federal criteria for listing and delisting threatened and endangered species, adopting the federal definition of threatened species, incorporating Maryland's existing regulatory definition of harm, and maintaining federal protection for migratory birds. SB 341 is a cross-file of House Bill 578, which has already passed out of this committee and the full House with one key difference. An important amendment from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources was inadvertently omitted from the House version. The House sponsor, Delegate Balakovich Carr, supports the inclusion of this amendment and agrees it is necessary to strengthen the bill. For that reason, we respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 431 and urge adoption of the Senate version.
Senator, you're doing so well with that first bill, going with the House position. Now you want to go with the Senate position? Any questions? Delegate Boyce.
I don't know about that, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, one of my favorite senators.
Thank you, good to see you as well.
Yes, we have been getting a lot of questions, I guess, on page 10 of the bill, lines essentially from the prior page 9 until page 10 up to lines 1 through 5 about the including incidental take. Have you received any emails about that? I have been slightly inundated.
Yeah, we did. Section 10-2A03 says, except as provided in regulations adopted by the Secretary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there is a concern that line 4, number 2, when it says may not, comma, including the incidental take, any migratory bird listed certainly under federal, under 50 CFR 10.13 in effect as of January 1st, 2025. I think there is an understanding on individuals who may already have a federal permit and then thereby may have to get a state permit, that it would require a permit of every bird on the migratory bird list, not just those that are endangered. And so I've been getting questions about that. I know council is working with the sponsors, and I just want to put it on the record as well as these individuals to get some clarification about what that may mean and if they would actually have to get a permit for every bird or that may come in contact with a project or current facilities or current power lines or current developments.
Right. Okay. All right.
So I just wanted to know, were you aware of that?
Right. Yeah. We are confident about that. Why we're confident about that is because it has similar prohibitions on taking of endangered and threatened species unless there are exceptions in providing a regulation. And the DNR promulgated those ESA regulations as a long time ago, and they were very reasonable and consistent with the long-term standing federal regulations. I fully expect them to also do that with the migratory birds, you know. Yeah, but we anticipate that DNR will promulgate regulations on designations of essential habitats.
Okay, and I know that we need to, if you're okay, checking with DNR to figure out how potentially long that would take, because I think there's a worry about, I mean, a gap is a gap, but there's a question about how long potentially would it take DNR to promulgate those regulations.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Brooks? Hello?
Oh.
How are you, my friend?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Did the House Cross file HB 431, we passed that correctly, correct? Did we
Yes,
pass
you did.
that?
Right, yes, you did.
And is it in the same posture as?
No,
It's not, okay, thank you.
okay.
Yeah, he said we have to, he wants us to conform, they want to conform the House bill to the Senate bill.
Right.
Additional questions? Okay, that concludes Bill hearing on Senate Bill 431. We'll turn to Senator Augustine, SB 280, Natural
Thank you, Chair.
Resources, State Parks Terminology. You sure don't have the Metro Modification Funding Act in that pile?
I wish. Chair Corman, and I'm not exactly sure what is to your right. Oh, and the Vice Chair. Senator Malcolm Augustine here on behalf of Senate Bill 280, which is in the exact same posture as House Bill 404, which this committee passed in the exact same posture. I would ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 280 in the same posture as House Bill 404.
Thank you. Any questions? Vice Chair has a question. That concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 280. We will turn to Senator Mounts, SB 610, Natural Resources Invasive Blue Catfish Pilot Program Alterations.
Hello, my name is Spencer Rada. I'm testifying on behalf of Senator Mounts. This is my second time testifying. I just got back from my first time. This is my second test, so we're going to see how this goes. So, but the senator is here for any questions if the committee has any. So, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and distinguished members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, my name is Spencer Rada, and on behalf of Senator Johnny Mounts, Senate Bill 610, as amended, will create an incentive for more commercial harvest of blue catfish. SB 610 will add the blue catfish gill net program to the invasive blue catfish pilot program, and most importantly, expands the opportunity for commercial harvesters with TFLs to use 7-inch gill nets, ensuring that harvesters can catch the fish with the best value. Under the bill, this pilot program sunsets in 2030, when decisions can be made to further expand or curtail the use of this fishing gear. Senate Bill 610 passed unanimously in the Senate, just as the House Cross file, HB 947, did in the House. I appreciate your consideration and respectfully ask for a favorable committee report on SB 610.
All right, great job. Any questions? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 610. We'll turn to Senator McKay, Senate Bill 480, Off-Highway Recreational Vehicle Recreation Oversight Board Establishment. If you have a panelist, you can bring them up.
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair, but she was just in JPR and she was dressed differently. She was. So if we may, committee, thank you very much. Senator Mike McKay to present Senate Bill 480. The purpose is to create a formal advisory body that provides expert guidance to the Secretary of Natural Resources regarding the management and expansion of off-highway vehicle recreation in Maryland. This is a bill you have heard last year when it was a part of this committee, because you're changing that. You heard it last year. It did pass the Senate. There were some questions that were answered during the interim, and I believe that those questions have been resolved. It is in the same posture as it was last year. I have Mr. Rattino here to give a little bit more
say about what the 480 is and be glad to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. My name is James Rotino. I'm the president of the Maryland Off-Highway Vehicle Alliance. We're an all-volunteer organization here trying to further advocate for sustainable OHV recreation. So that'll include things like full-size vehicles such as Jeeps, side-by-sides, ATVs, and off-highway motorcycles. This bill would create an advisory board that helps oversee the expenditures of an existing fund that goes for the sole purpose of creation and maintenance of trails. Right now, we're the leading advocate for these funds to be used in the manner of which we're trying to further, but we believe that it's important to have other individuals who are at the end of the day using these trails also further their opinions on how this fund should be used. So we hope for a favorable report.
Thank you very much. And Senator, thanks for meeting with Delegate Boyce and I in the interim to talk about the bill. Any questions? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 480. Lydia, you ready?
Thank you.
She's there? There they go. All right. SB 164, Natural Resources Pamela J. Kelly Tree Mendes Maryland Program alterations.
Hello, thank you for being patient. For the record, my name is Lydia McPherson, and I'm with the Department of Natural Resources. This is a very simple bill, which you all voted on when the bill was presented by the Secretary of DNR. It simply modifies a program to expand the use of the Pamela J. Kelly Tree Mendes Fund to include maintenance rather than just planting. So we respectfully ask for your favorable report.
Thanks very much. Any questions on the bill? Okay, that concludes bill hearing on SB 164. Senator Simon, are you good? You ready? All right. SB 21, Natural Resources State Parks Maryland Golden Age Pass. And if you have a panelist, please bring them up.
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, I have a couple. I have the secretary here. Could we do Senate Bill 301 first, or we can do 21? That's fine. All right. Thank you so much. For the record, Senator Brian Simon Ayer, presenting the Veterans Discount Act. After 20 years, I'm finally retiring. I know some are as well, and I appreciate working with each one of you. I think if I stayed any longer, I might look like your new vice chair there. So, this is a cross-file of Delegate Kipke's House Bill 1594. Unfortunately, it got filed late, and is in the.
Sorry, continue, sir. Sure. I apologize, that was cute. All right.
Anyway, this is a cross-file of Delegate Kipke's House Bill 1594, which got filed late and is in the Rules Committee. And if this committee so desires to move this bill, I would ask you also if you could move the House bill, and we'll make sure it gets out of rules in the Senate. Some of you may wonder why I put so many military and veterans bills in. I've worked as a defense contractor for the last 40 years, and I've gone overseas, Central America, Middle East, for 10 years of my life with my family. And I've seen the dedication of our veterans and active duty service members. And I made a promise at that time, if I ever had a chance and an opportunity to help them, I would. And this is one small way I can help our veterans. So to the bill, this is a consensus legislation honoring our veterans and has no opposition, no fiscal note, and I work with the Department of Veterans and Military Families, numerous departments, the Attorney General, seniors, and veteran advocate groups. And while this is a large bill, it's rather simple as it authorizes the existing regulatory process to adjust fees that are set in statute when considering a veteran's discount. So this sets up a framework and it's enabling, but it also sets up guardrails. So when we put this together, we didn't want a willy-nilly type of thing. So if there are proposed fee reductions, then it has to go through the regulatory process. For fees that aren't set in statute, we already have that in current process. So this is not a new concept. It just simply tweaks the existing regulatory authority to also allow discounts for those set in statute. So what this bill does is three main things. It establishes the authority and the framework, it sets the guardrail protections, and it enables easy alterations for future generations. Now, over the years, I'm sure you've seen other legislators put in veterans bills for discounts and so forth year after year. And there are literally, when I researched it, over hundreds of fees set in statute. So I wanted to come up with a more comprehensive way instead of taking up all the time each year with legislation. So I reached out to the Attorney General's office and I said, can you change a fee that is set in statute and provide a discount? And they said it depends. They said in some cases you can, many cases you can't. So the cleanest and most straightforward approach is to set up the framework to grant this enabling authority where appropriate. Now, knowing the fiscal situation, this is enabling, it's not mandated. Each department, each board has to go through and see if it's appropriate for them, the timing and the flexibility, and then it has to go through the regulatory process. So the way I came up with these particular fees was I saw what had made the most sense for veterans, and I tried to make them at least $50 or more, because if you have a $5 fee, what's the point of giving a discount on that? And it's easy for inclusion. In closing, I will share one of the department's conversations who appreciated this approach. They said, and I quote, "I will note additionally that we have run into this predicament before, whereby an emergency or some more unforeseen a situation occurred. We sought ways to provide means of relief, but were hampered by the statutory language." So with that, the departments have appreciated the intent. They love the flexibility, and this is meaningful, and it shows we honor our veterans and makes Maryland more welcoming to veterans. And for that reason, I ask for your favorable consideration.
Okay, I apologize. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Ed Rothstein. I am your secretary for Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families. First and foremost, I just also want to publicly thank Senator Seminary for all the work he's been doing, and best of luck on your retirement. And I am here today to support Senate Bill 301, the Veterans Discount Act. This is a straightforward bill. It gives the state agencies, as shared, the option to waive certain fees for veterans when appropriate. Even small costs can create barriers when veterans are trying to access service opportunities. This bill provides a practical way to reduce those barriers without mandates, but by giving agencies flexibility. It also aligns with Maryland's commitment to those who have served and supports our broader effort to improve access for veterans and their families. In Maryland, we are working every day to build a state when veterans are not just thanked for their service, but supported in meaningful, practical ways. Therefore, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 301.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, distinguished committee. My name is Larry Zarzecki, and I'm part of the AARP Advocacy Committee. Thank you for hearing us today. State, what exactly does SB 301 do? Well, it does not mandate. Let me repeat that. It doesn't mandate discounts. It allows flexibility to incorporate discounts. It simply reduces costs for occupational licenses, certifications that small business registrations need to help their veterans enter the workforce, whether it be carpentry, home improvement. It's a balanced, fiscally responsible way to support veterans, and AARP respectfully urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator, for the bill. As you may know, my husband's a retired military as well, but the question I have is, it really goes back to the statutory setting of fees. A lot of that has been done over the years to make sure that the programs are sustained and that the fees need to be set to cover the cost of running the program globally. So obviously, you're going to be socializing this benefit for the veterans by taking it from other people who are buying these various licenses and fees. And my question is, actually, my question is for the secretary. Do you have the support of the other secretaries? Because this isn't coming out of your budget. It's coming out of the, fishing licenses and all the various things. Is there enough money already available in these programs to sustain this kind of ongoing discount?
I appreciate the question, and I cannot speak to what is available. The reason I am supporting this bill is it is enabling legislation and does not dictate. So it would come down to each department to determine whether they can or cannot.
Well, you understand, I think most of us understand that it's very hard to say no to veterans. And so even though it's enabling, there definitely would be pressure on various agencies to go ahead with something, and that's why I'm concerned about it.
No, I do appreciate it, and I also agree it is difficult to say no to veterans, especially nowadays. And in sticking with the theme of our governor, we want to support as best we can, but we are not going to dictate or direct. Therefore, again, being enabling, I feel comfortable sitting here today.
Thank you so much.
If I could just respond, I did reach out to the other departments that were affected, and none of them opposed it. They were concerned that if it was mandated this year, they didn't know if they would have the funds. They also wanted us to put it through the regulatory process where I think there's 14 or more senators and delegates that it has to go through. So there is a review process. It wouldn't just be, we're going to put this out and hope we have the money type of thing. And there are funds that actually do have excess money, which are constantly transferred into the general fund. So that would have to be up to each department and the need of what they saw. So again, we took a comprehensive but a flexible approach. And we do it in legislation all the time.
Okay, is David Dragus here as well?
Yes.
Can you make some room for him?
Chair Corman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of Senator Simon Ayer's bill. For the record, I'm Dave Dragic, Legislative Director of the Maryland Military Coalition. Veterans are among those disproportionately impacted by occupational licensure policy. With interstate relocations and a propensity for employment in licensed occupations, veterans are particularly affected by licensure fees, which must be paid to keep a license active or upon relocation to a new state. This adverse impact is exacerbated by the potential for required licensure over a career and a licensed occupation. Even if Maryland offers a less restrictive license portability policy or expedited licensure, fees remain a barrier. SB 0301 addresses this problem by enabling state departments and agencies to waive a required fee in whole or in part for a veteran. Passing this bill is further recognition of those who have served in uniform and deserve this benefit. For these reasons, the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports SB 0301 and asks for a favorable report from the committee. And we would like to thank Senator Simon Ayer for sponsoring this legislation and appreciate his leadership on this issue.
Any questions? Okay, that concludes the bill here on SB 301. Senator Simon Ayer, you mind if I let Senator Quarterman go? He's a one and done, so. Sure. Senator Quarterman, why don't you come up on SB 638, Natural Resources, Maryland Heritage Areas Authority Funding and Grants.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and in that spirit, I will keep this brief. For the record, Senator Paul Quarterman representing District 2, which is Washington and Frederick counties. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 638, Natural Resources, Maryland Heritage Areas. You guys heard this bill as a cross-file was heard in this committee this year. You also heard this bill last year. The bill last year passed unanimously out of this committee as well as on the Senate floor. Passed on the House floor, I believe, 137-1. It essentially raises the cap from $6 million to $12 million for our heritage areas. It's authorizing language. It is not a mandate. Again, it is authorizing. And you'll see broad support across the state, probably from every end of the state of everyone that represents this room and throughout the General Assembly. So I did focus and watch your previous meeting, and so for Delegate Boyce and Delegate Naraki, we have spoken with the governor's office on many occasions. Spoke with them again today before walking into this room. They have no issue there in support. I believe that message has been conveyed to the chairman as well. There is an amendment we worked on in conjunction with Delegate Baylor as well, and I believe he has submitted that to the committee. So with that, we would appreciate your support and ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. I do not see any questions. So that concludes the bill hearing on SB 638. We're going to sneak in Senator Waldstreicher, SB 314, Courts, Immunity from Liability, Donation of Pet Supplies. I was told not to keep a vice chair waiting, so.
Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Really appreciate your having me here. Senate Bill 314 has no cross-file, so this is the first time you are hearing this bill. Under current law, restaurants and grocery stores under certain controlled circumstances are allowed to donate food intended for human consumption. There is an existing structure. It works well. There's no complaints, and we're glad we have that opportunity for the people who need it. There is no such structure for pet food. This bill would simply add to the current allowable donation of human food the same structure for pet food to be donated for pet use. And so how does this work in practice? The large retailers that sell pet foods throw away hundreds of thousands of pounds of pet food each day, pet food that is usable and could be donated to our rescues and kennels to ensure that their costs remain low and that these animals are fed. And so that's simply what the bill does, and I would ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 314.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Flory, and I am the treasurer of PAWS as well as the Community Care and Advocacy Director with the Maryland SPCA. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for allowing me to testify today. This is a really important bill to the shelters in the state of Maryland. Almost every private and public shelter has some type of food pantry that we help keep pets in homes. The need is so incredibly great that on pretty much a weekly basis, we're asking for more and more donations so that we can help more pets in our community. We are asking for a favorable report so that we can continue to do this, that we can ensure that our shelters are not bringing in more animals simply because of a need for food. So we hope that you will provide a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chairman Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and members of the committee. My name is Ryan Silva, and I am the Outreach Manager at the Maryland SPCA, and I am here today to urge a speedy and favorable report on Senate Bill 314. Each year, the Maryland SPCA distributes more than 1.6 million meals to the hungry pets in Baltimore through our Kibble Connection food pantry. This pantry helps hundreds of people keep their pets in their homes and out of shelters by providing supplemental food assistance to pet owners facing food insecurity. For many families, pets are not just animals, they are part of the family. When someone is struggling financially, being able to feed their pet can ease stress, provide stability, and most importantly, help them avoid the heartbreak of having to surrender a beloved part of the family. Keeping pets with their families also supports emotional well-being, especially for children, older adults, and people going through difficult times. Our program is only possible because of generous donations from individuals and organizations such as Chewy and Greater Good. Without these donations, our pet food pantry simply would not exist. Senate Bill 314 would provide important protections for organizations like ours to receive that donated pet food and distribute it back into the community. It would allow us to continue accepting the donations, and it would also allow us, most importantly, to support the families who rely on it. No family should have to choose between feeding themselves and keeping the pet they love. This is why I respectfully urge you to vote favorably on Senate Bill 314. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Hello, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and esteemed members of the ENT Committee. My name is Stacy Voloden. I am the Maryland State Director for Humane World for Animals. Most of my points have already been touched upon regarding the urgent nature of this bill. Truly, our shelters are under so much strain currently from understaffing, lack of donations, and the strain of increased relinquishment we're seeing at record rates across the state. This bill simply unlocks the generosity of Maryland entities to be able to donate to these pet food pantries and the shelters. One thing I do want to point out is, as the Maryland State Director, I'm connected with a large majority of the larger shelters across every county within the state. I, at the beginning of this session, sent out a list of pet food pantries to each of your offices so you knew of the resources available in your districts to point constituents to. These pet food pantries daily, I receive pleas or see pleas on social media. They are hemorrhaging food. So any way to help alleviate some of their constraints would just be a monumental achievement. So we urge a favorable vote on SB 314.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a fascinating bill, but I'm not the smartest person. What are the kinds of foods you're looking to have donated from a grocery store, or could you help me there, please?
Generally, pet food. These two experts would be the main persons.
So we will pretty much take any pet food we can, whether it is cat food, dog food, dry, wet, treats, you name it, we get requests for it literally every single day. So anyone that, what we find a lot, like specifically grocery stores, they repackage their food. They have new branding. So they can no longer sell that food. And it ends up going into the garbage can instead of coming to a shelter where we could get it out to needy families that really need it.
So, for example, Purina dog chow could be something a giant grocery store could donate to a food shelter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have virtual testimony. Let's bring up Lisa Radoff, Maryland Votes for Animals.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, members of the committee. My name is Lisa Radoff. I'm here in support of SB 314. I am the chair and president of Maryland Votes for Animals. You've already heard about the need for these donations from the boots on the ground shelters. I just want to also give you the perspective of the donors. I so often, as Maryland Votes for Animals, get requests from people who say, my cat doesn't eat this brand of food, or my vet doesn't allow my dog to bring this food. And if you go up to a lot of the shelters, for example, Maryland SPCA, there is a place where you can donate that food and give life-saving treatment to an animal, life-saving food. So for people that do that, I would say this bill is the assume good intentions bill. It preserves the positive relationship between donors and recipient organizations by providing reassurance that individuals acting with the best intentions, no malicious intentions, and simply trying to do the right thing for animals will not be unfairly penalized for that generosity. With that, I'd like to thank Senator Waldstreicher and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Sally Tom as well? Sally Tom. Going once, going twice. Oh, here you go.
Hello?
Hello, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sally Tom. I live in Silver Spring. I have volunteered for 8 years in animal rescue, and I work at a big box pet. Several years ago, I asked our store manager why we threw so many bags and cans of dog and cat food, as well as other supplies, into the trash. He said, liability. Company is afraid a shelter or rescue group would sue if food donated by the company caused an animal to become ill. In short, lack of protection against an extremely hypothetical, unlikely lawsuit leads to actual, real, tremendous loss. 4 facts spill. 1, 30 years ago, the Emerson attack solved this problem. Restaurants and retailers who donate food to organizations that feed people. 2, huge amounts of edible, safe pet food end up in landfills every year. Some of it is expired, but as you probably know, expired food is almost always unsafe to eat. Subsequent manager guesstimated that in our own store, we threw out an average of 50 pounds of kibble every day. 50 pounds of kibble per day times 365 days per year times 3,000 stores nationwide is almost 55 million pounds of kibble. In short, there is no supply. 3, with human food, unlike with human food, we're also talking about all other kinds of supplies. Anything a store sells can end up in a landfill. 4, as you've heard, animal shelters and rescue groups desperately, urgently need donations of retailers' food and supplies. They allow the organizations to spend their limited funds on goods and services that are not normally donated. In short, there is no demand problem. There is a distribution problem, and this bill can remove the blockade that keeps usable food and supplies trapped in landfills. This bill distributes those goods into the hands of organizations that help homeless animals. I urge you to pass this bill, and I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I see no questions. That concludes the bill hearing on SB 314. Folks, you can all see the clock. We're not going to finish before the bells ring, so we'll go until the bells ring, and then we'll have to come back. A lot of these bills didn't have cross files. They have multiple witnesses. We want to make sure they get due consideration. Let's bring up Scott Tiffin from Senator Lamb's office if he's here. We can knock that one out. SB 54, State Board of Veterinary and Medical Examiners, grounds for disciplinary action restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Scott Tiffin from Senator Clarence Lamb's office. He's over in the Health Committee at the moment, so wasn't able to join. I'm here in favor of Senate Bill 54. It's a direct cross-file identical to the Vice Chair's bill, which is House Bill 452. Both have passed overwhelmingly in both chambers, so hopefully we can get, across the final finish line. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on this bill? Okay, that concludes SB 54. Is someone here for Senator Attar? SB 879. Okay, then we will go to Senator Kramer, SB 423, Research or Animal Research Modernization and Best Practices Act of 2026. And Senator Kramer, I know how you like to talk, so we're probably gonna have to pause in the middle of your hearing and come back.
And that'll be just fine. I'll be happy to come back and continue well into this evening, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ben Kramer introducing Senate Bill 423. And I just have to, before I start, I heard Delegate Morgan comment that he's not the smartest guy, and I want to take issue with that. He is an exceptionally smart guy. So having said that, colleagues, this bill is the cross-file to House Bill 666, which you have heard from the good Delegate Cullison. And it deals with, in keeping with the theme of what you just heard, hugging the puppies and loving the puppies. This is about just that. And whenever possible, trying to minimize the use of animals, particularly our companion animals, dogs and cats, in the use of in research. It has been heavily amended from the bill that you heard from Delegate Cullison, as was introduced in the Senate. The bill does no longer apply to research with regard to drugs and vaccines. It is limited to testing facilities, in that when a federal agency grants a waiver to the entity doing the research, grants them a waiver that they do not have to use live animals, particularly, again, companion animals, that they can actually utilize modern 21st century technology, which gives, typically speaking, much better results than torturing dogs in research. Then utilize 21st century technology and stop torturing the dogs in research. And, but if the feds say, no, we're going to require that you use live animals, continue using live animals. That's really all this bill says at this point. If for testing purposes, primarily chemicals, pesticides, household products, and cleaners, if you've been granted a waiver to use just modern technology, utilize it. And that's, I think, where we are moving in this direction, as we have realized that what we've been doing for the past 100+ years is no longer necessarily that relevant. And once again, technology is providing far superior outcomes and results as it relates to human beings than experimenting on animals. That's the bill, Mr. Chair. I won't go any deeper into it because you have heard the bill. But certainly would welcome any questions. And as I said, the bill now is in a very different posture than that when it was first introduced. And I believe there's a panel of one here, and I'm happy to turn it over.
Good afternoon.
Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Mary Hilly, and I am a specialist in the Animal Research Issues Department at Humane World for Animals, formerly called the Humane Society of the United States. I'm here today to speak in support of SB 423, the Animal Research Modernization and Best Practices Act. Passage of SB 423, which unanimously passed the Senate with bipartisan support, will help Maryland continue its momentum as a leader in promoting the use of the best available science. In 2023, Maryland became the first state in the nation to create a fund that provides grants to scientists developing non-animal technologies. That accomplishment is only one step in ensuring that animal experiments are replaced with more accurate science. Maryland must now mandate that once these new non-animal approaches are developed, companies producing products such as chemicals and pesticides are required to use them, a logical next step. This bill does not get ahead of science, but rather ensures the use of the best science available, which are methods that are the most relevant to human biology. SB 423 prohibits the use of animal tests when relevant regulatory agencies have approved an alternative or granted a waiver from doing the animal test. It also provides some basic protections for dogs and cats used in research. The bill will not be a burden on taxpayers, as its fiscal note reflected it was expected to be implemented with existing resources. Over the last several decades, federal agencies have been actively working to approve data from non-animal test methods, and Maryland should now make sure these new technologies are used by industry. This bill is consistent with laws passed in other states that have prioritized the use of the best available science. Finally, polling shows that Maryland voters strongly support efforts to replace animal tests with alternatives, and I refer the committee to my written testimony, which includes this data. Thank you for your time and attention. We urge a favorable report on SB 423.
Great, thank you. As many of you have noted, the floor has been moved back to 3, so we're going to keep going and do as much as we can. Vice Chair Guyton.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing this bill. Yes, we've heard. Not working, I know, but it kept going off. Thank you. Yes, we've heard the other version of this bill prior, so I appreciate it, and I've studied that quite a bit. So if you could, Senator, would really appreciate, I'm looking at the reprint here from the Senate, would really appreciate a more detailed explanation of what the amendments do to this bill. I'm looking at it. It's a little different than what I had heard what had been done. Currently, as amended, this bill does not ban animal, you tell me if this is right or not. This bill does not ban animal research. It only says that if you get a waiver saying that, say that to me again, because this part, I don't believe the waiver was part of the bill before, is that right?
No, the waiver has always been part of the bill. And just so you understand, the bill never banned animal research, period, for any purpose. It simply provided that when the federal agency requiring a study would permit or grant a waiver for the use of animals, then it would be appropriate for the entity doing the research to use the current technology, not to use animals. The bill before you now is amended and taking out any research with regard to drugs and vaccines. So the bill originally still would have permitted the use of animals for research in dogs or in it for drugs and vaccines, but it still would have been if the Fed said, okay, use something other than dogs or cats for this vaccine research or drug research, then they would have used something else. That is out of the bill. So the bill does not touch drugs and vaccines. Research entities can torture all the dogs and cats and animals they want.
I'm a real dog lover, so this is making me uncomfortable. You don't talk about torturing puppies anymore, but so you talked about granting, if a research facility has been granted a waiver saying they do not have to use it, they can use other methods, do they have to apply for that waiver? Is that something they would request? Or do
I'm
they
not sure-
automatically have to request that?
I don't believe it requires a request. I think typically speaking, the agency will give them the alternative and notify them that they do have an alternative and they can use the alternative. And for what it's worth, the feds are moving heavily in the direction of getting away from animals. The FDA is moving heavily in that direction. So there is a lot coming down from the Fed saying you can use other than animals for research. Sometimes it's quicker and easier to simply throw animals into the equation and experiment with them. This provides that, well, it may be quicker and easier, but if you were granted an alternative, use the alternative. But again, as amended, the bill only is applicable to testing with regard to certain products, and again, mostly along the lines of household cleaners, pesticides, chemical substances. So this is sort of a baby step in the direction that the original bill was looking to move.
All right, thank you so much. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm like really sensitive to torturing puppies. So thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Kramer, I should say, excuse me.
And you're a smart guy.
I try. So I'm very happy to see this bill come forward, specifically recognizing dogs and cats. But I also see it says vertebrates. So I'm going to assume that dolphins and sharks will be included. And you will be the first one on board in the Senate supporting a shark bill.
Only real sharks, not the fantasy ones.
I'm trying to give you a chance, buddy.
Delegate Ziegler.
Chair. So as amended, does this bill apply to universities?
No, and it never did. They were exempted out from Jump Street. So no, it does not.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we do have some virtual witnesses. We have Lisa Radoff, Maryland Votes for Animals. You're on mute. Lisa, you're on mute.
Whoops.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Lisa Radoff from Maryland Votes for Animals here in support of SB 423. I know the hour is late and you all are going to be reconvening in the House. So just wanted to say that this is a very, very popular bill with Marylanders, with your voters. We hear a lot about it. I think you all have gotten it in your offices. As you heard from Senator Kramer, the bill has been amended so that we're not taking away Johns Hopkins or that ability with vaccines or with medicines. So just would hope for a favorable report. It's a balanced, forward-looking approach to scientific progress, and yet it's humane at the same time. Thanks again to Senator Kramer. Hope for a favorable report.
Thank you. Thomas Hartung, Johns Hopkins.
Okay. Hello, Thomas Hartung. I'm Chair for Evidence-Based Toxicology at Johns Hopkins University. I'm not representing Johns Hopkins University, but I'm here in my private role, but it's also not necessary, as you just heard, as Hopkins is not affected by this rule, and to the best of my knowledge, such research does not take place. However, I'm the director of the Center for Alternatives to Animal Testing, which was created here in Baltimore 44 years ago as the first US-American institution of this kind, which is trying as an information hub to inform about the possibilities and needs for replacing animal testing. As my accent gives away, I'm German by origin. I'm 17 years here in the US now. But in Europe, where I worked for the European Commission in a similar function, this is already the law of the land for 40 years exactly. Since 1986, this applies in all of the European countries that whenever an alternative is reasonably and practically available, it has to be used. So I am very happy that this is a suggested adaptation to the state of the art. Because you have to understand, I'm now 62 years old, and the tests we are talking about have been introduced when I was not yet born or in kindergarten. So it is a very unusual situation in science, where at the same time in Maryland, fantastic alternatives are being developed. In silica, for example, in Rockville, Maryland, just presented last week at the Society of Toxicology a new AI-based method which beats any animal test. And our center is at front of other developments for highly complex in human in vitro systems doing the trick. Thanks a lot, and please support this bill.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions. That concludes the bill here on SB 423. We'll bring back Senator Simon-Ayer. Sorry, I've been ping-ponging you around, Senator. And we can start with Senate Bill 21, Natural Resources, State Parks, Maryland Golden Age Pass. Apparently, I missed a virtual witness. Unfavorable, Maryland Right to Life, Laura Bogley. So let me do her really quick, Senator. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Laura Bogley, Executive Director of Maryland Right to Life, and we oppose this bill. Perhaps it's a happy accident that this bill that deals with research on human beings is not before the Health Committee, because today you have the opportunity by issuing an unfavorable report to determine that going forward, the state of Maryland will only utilize ethical methods of human relevant research that do not create a demand for either butchered babies or puppies. This bill will immortalize this unethical testing as the best practice in Maryland. We all love our animals, but it is impossible to be humane without demonstrating at least the same compassion for preborn human beings that you do for non-human animals. Unfortunately, this assembly has gone out of its way to exclude preborn human beings from the legal protections afforded to cats, dogs, monkeys, and even mice. But the cruel consequences of such policies is that the human babies are literally torn limb from limb and harvested for their organs. Maryland has long been the epicenter for federal fetal tissue research, artificially driving up the demand here for intact remains of aborted babies, many obtained through late-term and even partial birth abortions in violation of federal law. Maryland is home to NIH, which serves as the primary engine for fetal tissue research. In fiscal year 2024 alone, before the recent federal prohibition on federal funding, Maryland-based institutions spent an estimated $8 to $15 million on fetal tissue research. Maryland's leading academic institutions, including Johns Hopkins and University of Maryland, have historically used fetal tissue for various studies. In doing so, they wantonly provide scientific legitimacy that sustains the abortion industry by creating a demand for brains, livers, and hearts cut from aborted babies. The Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund is also a significant state-level contributor. In 2026, they were allocated $15.5 million. The state of Maryland should adopt as its standard only ethical forms of human-relevant research that can spare both human and non-human lives from inhumane treatment and destruction. Finally, I hope we can all agree that as human-relevant research involves testing on human beings, the fund should remain under the management of the Maryland Department of Health, as opposed to the Department of Agriculture. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no further questions, we're going to move on to SB 21. Again, Senator, my apologies. Natural Resources, State Parks, Maryland Golden Age Pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to consolidate. I know you all are getting back on the floor at 3. So Senator Brian Simon-Ayer, this is consensus legislation. It helps our seniors with no fiscal impact and has broad support. DNR supports this as well. It's the Maryland Golden Age Pass. And basically what we have here is we have laws in Maryland that are outdated with current policy. So it does two things. One, it updates to our current policy, but it also changes it has conflicts with current policy. The area it conflicts with is the camping days. Law says Monday through Thursday. Current policy is Sunday through Thursday. DNR would want it to be reflective of the current policy, which is Sunday through Thursday. So removes the conflicts, gets us up to date, no opposition, no fiscal impact, and I'd appreciate your support.
Hi, my name's Larry Zarzaki, and I think that I'm still part of the advocacy team with AARP. Thank you for having me today, Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, distinguished committee. At this point, I would just like to echo everything that Senator Simon-Ayer had to say. We really don't have anything to add other than it's building on the successful program by largely codifying, existing practices. There's no resistance. Everything has been good. So
Thank you.
we would really like your favorable review with this issue.
All right, thank you so much. The only question that I have for you, is there a fiscal note at all or fiscal impact to this bill?
There is not.
Okay, great answer. Seeing no questions on this one, that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 21, and we'll move on to Senate Bill 588, Natural Resources Complementary Fishing and Hunting Licenses Alterations.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Senator.
Appreciate it. Senator Simon Air presenting Senate Bill 588, improvements to the DNR's complementary licenses. I've worked with the Department of Natural Resources and sports groups who support this consensus legislation. No fiscal note, no opposition. It creates consistent benefits and equal provisions among the numerous complementary licenses. It also provides our natural resource officers the ability to receive complementary licenses in other states. It updates the reporting requirements so we know how many complementary licenses are being granted each year, and it clarifies that the commemorative lifelong hunting licenses are non-transferable. I could go into great detail, but I know you probably don't want that. In my testimony is a chart of all the different things that are being updated and making consistent. The one thing the DNR wanted was there are several that say they shall issue and they may issue. They wanted to be consistent to say that they may issue. We also updated the outstanding complementary licenses that are allowed to be granted to other states. Just a lot of things like that, and no opposition again.
Good morning, Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee. My name is David Lutzow, Senior Master Sergeant, retired United States Air Force, and a member of the Maryland Military Coalition Director. This bill was unanimously passed by the Senate and underscores the need for the updates to Maryland's code. Like Senator said, it changes language such as may and shall, so it affords the licensees, or shall to may, it affords the licensing agency enforcement officers the option to consider backgrounds rather than mandate them. Another example is changing out-of-state persons to any residents of any other state. An individual who lists a state other than Maryland may not be a resident of that state. This establishes a clear need to ensure the residency of the applicant. And the last example I'll bring up today is changing the current requirement that states the department may not establish a fee, which means they still could. And shall issue, it changes it to shall issue without a fee. This clearly removes any confusion of, do we or don't we? The changes within this bill may seem inconsequential to some, but they absolutely underscore Senator Simon Ayer's attention to detail and his commitment to Maryland. For these reasons, I ask for a federal report on 588. And for the record, as Senator Simon Ayer transitions to his new chapter in life, Maryland Military Coalition extends our gratitude and appreciation from his service and to the great state of Maryland.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing the bill. I'm an Army mom myself, so I appreciate that greatly. It looks like we don't have any questions on this bill, so that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 588. And Senator, stay where you are. Let's see, we have Senate Bill 161, Natural Resources State Park Entry Fee Exemptions.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Senator Brian Simon again presenting Senate Bill 161. This bill basically does two things. One, as you know, we had the veterans notations allowed on professional licenses that passed last year. So when they're allowed to go, when veterans are allowed to go into the state parks, we're expanding that to allow them to use the veterans notation ID on the license as it goes through the same process as the MVA driver's license to identify them. The other thing it does, currently, if you're active duty or a Maryland National Guard, you can get into a state park free, independent of your active duty service. When you retire, veterans can get in. What this does is it also aligns up with current policy that it allows former Maryland National Guard to get in, even if they didn't serve on active duty, but may have been in serving Maryland for 20 years. It's more of a technical definition, but it lines up with current policy. So we will allow our National Guards in once they retire as well.
Thank you. You may continue.
Okay, Vice Chair Guyton and members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of Senator Simon Ayer's bill. For the record, I'm Dave Dragics, retired Army colonel and the legislative director for the Maryland Military Coalition. SB 0161 will extend the waiver of the day use entrance service charge to former members of the Maryland National Guard as long as those individuals completed their service obligation and were discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable. These individuals had this privilege while serving in the Guard, whether it be for 6 or more years. The Maryland Military Coalition believes that this benefit and recognition should continue for those who qualify under the provisions of this bill. And we note that SB 0161 was passed unanimously by the Senate. And for these reasons, the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports SB 0161, asks for a favorable report from the committee, and we would like to thank Senator Simonaire for sponsoring this important legislation and appreciate his leadership on this issue.
Thank you. Delegate Healy.
I just wanted to ask, in light of the current policy that includes spouses and family members in the Veterans Department in Maryland, and does this legislation also include the family members?
This does not. This lines up with current policy. That would be a policy change if you want to do that.
Well, I mean, I guess at some level, the policy has changed because it's like the name of the department now, right?
Right. So Department of the Veterans and Military Family, and I actually have a bill in another committee that helps spouses, and I went through and identified different areas like scholarships and things like that and added them, but this was not one of the areas.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions on this bill, that ends the hearing of Senate Bill 167. Now, sir, I walked in from my own hearing, and you were, I believe, presenting Senate Bill 301. Have you already presented 199?
I have not.
All right, we'll go there then. Thank you so much. 199, Individuals with Disabilities and Service-Disabled Veterans Voting Fund Eligible Companions.
Okay, thank you. Senator Brian Simonaire presenting Senate Bill 199. There is a fund that's called the Individuals with Disabilities and Service Disabilities Veterans Voting Fund. This was created a couple years ago, and it helps those with disabilities and veterans with service disabilities. It allows them to work with nonprofits to provide sailing, boating, kayaking, canoeing, and so forth. This bill just simply improves it by saying that you can also have an accompanied family member or direct support professional. As you can imagine, some people with disabilities cannot participate without their support member, and this would add it. Has no opposition. Department of Disability supports it, and others. No fiscal impact. For that, I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Okay, and I see we have our friends from the Department of Disabilities here. You may give your 2 cents on this great bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Kirsten Bozak. I serve as the Director of Health and Behavioral Health Policy at the Department of Disabilities. I bring greetings from Secretary Beatty today. We are here in support of SB 199 and are here primarily to answer any questions you may have for the bill. We also would like to take a moment and recognize the joint effort of the House and the Senate to include funding for this bill of $400,000 in our fiscal year operating budget. And with that, really, we urge a favorable report for SB 199. Thank you so much.
Just to clarify that, the fund is getting funded, not this bill.
Sorry, yes.
This bill is just helping the fund with allowing accompanied people to go.
Okay, thank you. Could you clarify that just a little bit more so we have it on the record?
Sure. So this bill has zero fiscal note. It just clarifies that accompanied members and support professionals can also participate in this program to help those with disabilities.
Thank you so much. Any questions for this bill? All right, thank you. Seeing no questions, that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 199. And I think that's it. Did we miss one of yours today?
I've got 2 more.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, hold on. Let me.
167
I think I'm missing a page.
257.
I'm missing that page. So let me find it here. 301, 257. Let's go to 257 because it is right here.
Okay, this is an easy one.
Thank you so much. And this is Mel Nolan Woodland Incentives and Fellowship Fund reporting. Thank you.
Senate Bill 250.
This is, I have you sponsor only on this one.
Correct.
Okay.
Senate Bill 257. This is identical to Delegates signs wonderful HB 533 in the same form, passed unanimously. Ask for your favorable consideration.
That is great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that testimony. And so in order to reward you, then we will do that'll end the hearing on Senate Bill 257, unless there's a question. I don't see one, but we will finish up with Senate Bill 167. Senator Simon Ayer, Department of Natural Resources, licensing permits, registrations and public profiles, notation of veteran status.
Thank you. Senator Brian Simon Ayer presenting. I will keep this short. This committee passed a bill last year doing this exact same thing for the Department of Environment. It basically allows veterans notations to be put on occupational licenses or other licenses. The important thing is it's enabling, it's modeled after the MVA program. It's the department can at their timing implement it. And not only that, it allows the veteran to consent. They don't have to do this, but if they consent, they can get information shared from the Department of Veterans and Military Family about services and benefits that they can receive, about laws that are being updated. It's a way of keeping in touch with them. The MVA has a wonderful program, but we're only reaching about half our veterans through that. So this is just one more tool to reach out to our veterans and know what benefits and services they have. Again, 4 other departments already have it. 2 more are doing it this year, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Great, a lot of great work. Did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Okay, Vice Chair Guyton and members of this committee, thank you again for the opportunity to testify in favor of Senator Simon Ayer's bill. For the record, I'm Dave Dragic, Legislative Director for the Maryland Military Coalition. This bill is enabling legislation that authorizes the Department of Natural Resources to establish a process to include the designation veteran on the license, permit, registration, or public profile with the consent of the veteran. The MMC has strongly supported other bills that authorize this process, and we strongly support this bill for the same reasons. This bill offers recognition of veteran status while fully protecting privacy and individual choice. It reduces unnecessary administrative burdens on veterans by making the notation process more efficient and improves how this department serves veterans. And this bill enhances the state's ability to connect veterans with benefits and services they might not even realize they qualify for. As we have pointed out on other similar bills, many veterans fall through the cracks simply because they are unaware of available programs or have difficulty navigating multiple agencies. This legislation helps close that gap in a responsible and efficient manner. And the bill is a practical, affordable, and sensible measure that helps veterans while respecting privacy and keeping the Department of Natural Resources efficiency. We also note that this bill was passed unanimously by the Senate, and for these reasons, the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports SB 0167 and asks for a favorable report from the committee, and we would like to thank Senator Simon Ayer for sponsoring this important legislation, and again, appreciate his leadership on this issue.
Seeing no questions for you, Senator. Thank you so much for the work that you've done. And that ends the hearing for House Bill 167. And we're going to move on to Senator Attar. And we have Senate Bill 879, Baltimore City Natural Resources Archery Hunting Safety Zones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry for being late. Senate Bill 879 is a direct cross-file of House Bill 1324, which this committee passed and passed the House of Delegates. There's only one difference, and Senate Bill 879 does not, it removes District 43A from Baltimore City from this piece of legislation, and I ask for a favorable support.
All right. Any questions on this bill or this amendment? All right, seeing none, that ends the hearing today of Senate Bill 879.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And all of our hearings for today. So we are going to make it to the floor. Friends, do we have some subcommittee announcements? All right, Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Motor Vehicle and Transportation Subcommittee will meet tomorrow, Thursday. So keep your head on a swivel. Exact details will be shared. Thank you.
All right, Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Environment Subcommittee will meet today 10 minutes after the end of floor session.
Anyone else? Delegate Ziegler. Delegate Ziegler?
I don't think so at the moment. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, no subcommittee?
Oh, not that I'm aware of.
All right, everyone, with that, we are adjourned. And as soon as we go off camera, which we should have done before.